Yes, I thought I'd be brave or foolish and come here with no slides, and I'll share why as I go. First of all, I'm really delighted to be here today to share the story of how we've moving towards mobile learning as a learning channel within PwC. Like everyone in the industry, I think probably most of you would agree, we're all still very much at a learning point in terms of mobile learning. Trying to work out what we should be doing with it, how effective it's going to be, how to design it. And there's an awful lot out there on the web if you go downstairs and talk to all the vendors about what to do, you know, steps and some really great ideas on learning design, really good examples on people's stands. So I thought what I'd do today is I would share the story from the cold face really, from within inside a large organisation, how we moved from a place where we had no mobile learning to about to launch the mobile learning channel. I'll start by just introducing myself, and then I'll talk mostly about the pilot that we did, and then the lessons we learned. So my background is I've been in the e-learning industry for many, many years. Started off in the vendor world, and I joined PwC 10 years ago to work with our clients, consulting on change projects, looking at learning technology. And I'm now in a different role looking at innovation within learning and learning culture. PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, as many people know, is a large global organisation with about 170,000 people, professional services, and I work in the UK firm with 17,000 people. There are learning technology groups scattered throughout PwC, and I'm in the UK one. And all of us in this world, probably 5 years ago, believed that mobile learning was the new way to do things. It was the new channel, and we were absolutely convinced that PwC should be delivering and supporting mobile as a channel. And so that was, we started doing odd little prototypes here and there, and my first one was in 2007, where we prototyped some mobile learning. Everyone said, yes, that's the way to go, and then nothing happened because people didn't have handsets, senior people weren't really convinced of the benefits, and they said, show us it works, show us the financials to say the mobile learning channels will work and deliver more effective, efficient learning. And at that time we looked outside the industry, and I'm seeing some faces here who helped us look outside, and we said, show us all the case studies, show us all these financial benefits, and nothing we could find could help convince people internally in PwC because none of it applied to us. So roll on a few years, and we started to get some support from mobile learning. And I think what really happened, if you look at why did we get just a small amount of support, a number of our senior partners by then had teenage children, and they started to come to me and said, oh, what you were talking about in 2007, I've seen my son playing on his mobile, or doing this or that. So we suddenly got some very senior support in that way. And also people started to say, started to buy their own mobiles. So we had a few people, client-facing people mostly, who started to have their own mobiles as well as the mobiles we were given in PwC, which were very locked down. So anyway, through a number of reasons, we managed to convince people to give us small budgets to do some pilots. So the two main territories, the US and the UK, set about doing some pilots for mobile learning. And the whole purpose of these pilots were to find out if there was a hard and fast business case to introduce mobile learning, how we would manage it. There were a lot of fears about security of content, how would we track people, so we were investigating that whole platform. We also had one of the big debates and the questions that people said, okay, if you pilot, prove to us that people will learn from their mobiles rather than from their laptops. Unlike our first speaker, all our people, virtually all our people are desk-based, they've all got their own laptops. So a lot of our sponsors said, oh, they're really mobile, they've got laptops, they can take them. And it was really hard to explain without evidence that actually mobile learning is different than just carrying your laptop around. So that was a really big challenge for us. And the other question, we said, oh, well, mobile learning is very flexible. People can do learning when they want to do it, how they want to do it. So our sponsors would say, but how do we know anybody wants that? Nobody's asking us for that. How do we know it will be efficient? So are we going to have to produce everything in 2 different formats, and will that cost more? So we were investigating that. We were all using Blackberries at the time, which are very small screens, smaller than iPhones. So there was a big fear amongst our technical experts. Would you have to reduce the word count so much that you would dumb down the material, that you would patronise our people? And finally, we were looking at the cost. So if we set up this new mobile learning channel, how are we going to design this learning? Who's going to design it? How will it fit into the gender blend? And what would it cost us? The big hurdles, as an organisation, we had big hurdles. Jake was telling us about, dealing with 24 countries. We're dealing with many more countries, and we're a partnership organisation. We didn't even, and we still don't, have consensus for one learning management system. So we have a number of different learning management systems across the globe. And here we were saying, we want to create mobile learning, and we want whatever territory to create it to be able to share it with every other territory. We're very risk averse as an organisation. Our original pilot back in 2007, at the time all our Blackberries were completely locked down to the internet, so all we could get was email and our calendars. And our IT organisation let us open the Blackberries for 24 hours to demonstrate the e-learning that we developed, and then they took it all off again. And believe, we just didn't, it wasn't so much that people, they questioned belief. They just didn't believe, our people, our technical experts, didn't believe mobile learning would be the right thing for PwC. They said, yes, it's the right thing for banks or for telephone companies or for all these people. But for us, PwC, wrong. We need lots of detail. We need to sit at our desks with our laptops. And this sort of disbelief actually really helped us in the end, because people were so limited in their expectations that when we came to do the pilot, it was such a low benchmark in terms of what they were expecting. It was easy to please them. And our design content, our subject matter experts are sort of king in terms of design. They fill our e-learning programs with vast amounts of content. So for them, when we started looking at these small screens, it was just, a real challenge to get any of them to agree to work with us on pilots. For the pilots, and the reason I'm not showing you pictures of our pilot is that we produced it 18 months ago now, and we did lots of things on our pilot. We had videos, we had very small e-learning screens, we had questions, little case studies, and I think if you walk around an exhibition today, you will see so many examples that, what we did wasn't groundbreaking in terms of visual design. It was what you're seeing out there. It was good, and it was good enough. So really, I think the key sort of element of the story is why we were testing it and what we were testing, rather than the actual pictures and the visuals. So we had 3 key areas for our pilot. Tax, like sure, it's this very technical area where we put lots of volume. We already experimented at the time with looking at learning and knowledge and how we might combine that, and we took that into the mobile experience. We really wanted to get them to question about, do you need to track every bit of informal learning? We wanted to get them to really understand that less content doesn't mean dumbing down or patronising people. And we wanted to help change the mindsets in the technical areas. At the same time, another area that we piloted was around bias awareness. We were doing an innovative program, learning technology program, on bias awareness at the time. And we had some really high quality materials produced, videos, diagnostics. So we decided to experiment by putting those onto the mobile and using the mobile to help enforce simplicity. So where the program, the online e-learning program, ended up with lots of extra text and caveats in a very PwC way, the BlackBerry version stopped anyone adding extra text, and we got a very streamlined program on that. And that tested diagnostics. It also tested behavioural change, or could mobile support behavioural change? And that was really important to us, because if we lost the technical debate, we wanted to be able to prove that mobile could support change projects as well. And the final area was coaching. We had a lot of material, a lot of e-learnings on coaching. We used the GROW model, which might be familiar to some of you. And we said, can we just port those e-learnings over and put them on the BlackBerry? And it was probably a little naive to think it was that simple, you just flick a switch. So that was our plan. And we tested it all. The pilot was tested using the Intuition platform, which pushed and pulled content to people's Blackberries and tracked as well, and met our needs for security. And what we found overall, it was very surprising. I mean, I'm quite an optimist, and I think all the learning technology colleagues that I had all over the world were like really optimistic. But we were completely astounded, both in the UK and the US, by the level of support that our people who never asked for mobile learning came back to us and said, this is absolutely brilliant, we want mobile learning. In terms of the statistics, we had over 90% saying, you know, it was very easy to use, we learned from it, some of them showed us how they learned from it. People talked about the intensity of the learning experience that they'd never expected, so that when they were there with their little mobiles, it was quite different than being on the laptop with lots of distractions. 98% said that they'd recommend it to a friend or a colleague, which is a measure we use to measure our client satisfaction anyway. So that was astounding. And the US pilot had similar feedback, and at that point our sponsors could no longer ignore us and say, oh, it's just a hobby of learning technology people. We saw that our people loved it, it had the potential to work, and we had the proof. The other sort of interesting findings, when people used it, we tracked exactly when people went in and used content, and the periods when they used it were 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. and 5 to 6 p.m. with another blip around 12 to 1 at lunchtime. So people weren't using it late at night or at weekends, which was one of the fears, that we'd get into trouble for people doing all their learning in their own time. And they talked about using it, some people would use it for 15 minutes between meetings. As expected, they use it in hotels when they're travelling a lot, people travel a lot, and airport lounges. In the feedback, someone said, oh, I use it in the hairdressers when I was having my hair coloured. So in our focus groups at the end of the pilot, I shared that, and someone else put their hand up and said, oh, I did too. So useful for downtime. Interestingly, the older and more senior, not necessarily the same people, but if you were older or more senior, you liked it more than our younger population. And I think there were a couple of reasons for this. It was a bit clunky. Some of the screens were, you know, it was a low-cost pilot, really. So, you know, it wasn't beautiful. And I think older people had less expectations, where I think maybe some of the graduates who'd come in, you know, had higher expectations. And one of them actually said, oh, I wouldn't launch it until it's absolutely perfect and streamlined, which on a BlackBerry could take some time, okay? And the other reason that the older groups tended to like it more is that they're more in control of their own time at PwC. So the sort of new graduates and the pre-managers, we call them, tend to be told what to do when. So they felt it was us telling them to do learning in their own time. Whereas older people were said, oh, actually it's really flexible. I can do things now on the way to work rather than do my mandated training at the weekend. The simplicity, it forced us to do better design. The bias awareness piece was, I think, was way better on the mobile than it ended up online, because online we pushed loads of extra content, padded it all out and made the experience much longer. With the coaching, we couldn't just take any of our e-learnings and put them on. And in the end, we designed a really quick, very low-cost piece around one small aspect of coaching, just to test it out. And what we discovered was that although the bias awareness had lots of positive feedback and was a quite high budget, this piece on coaching, it cost virtually nothing. We slipped in, we hadn't even told our sponsors we were doing it really, and people loved it. It was just about one aspect, holding back, and we looked at different ways of holding back when in a coaching conversation, and it was amazing, and it was very simple, very clunky, but very well written. Audio, a lot of controversy about audio. Some people wanted much more audio-only podcasts to listen to on the way to work or something, and other people hated the audio. So whether our conclusion is you have to give people choice, I'm not sure. Volume of content, we believe that everything had to be really short, but what we've learned is that people are saying, actually, even if it was a bit longer, we would rather have the opportunity to do, say, our mandated compliance training on our mobiles than on our laptops. And so we haven't yet tested the longer course, but the US pilot did look at a longer course, and they did get positive feedback. And technically, there were a number of issues with designing online learning for Blackberries, which was to do with the memory, and it was quite frustrating. We couldn't have very much interaction at all. But once the pilot went live, and it went for about 2.5 months, we didn't have one technical problem with the Blackberries, with the content. It was remarkable for anyone who's been in learning technology. And then just to finish, we're 12 months after the pilot. We've just signed a contract for a global mobile management system. So I started by saying we don't even have a global learning management system. We now are about to implement, by June, we will have implemented a global mobile management system through which we'll be launching content. And all we have to do, and the last word is obviously then we still need to learn about what we're actually going to do, which content we're going to produce.